Hello friends, welcome to the M.A.R.E podcast. Before we get started, you can find our podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts and YouTube. Don't forget that you can find more about the M.A.R.E project at www.marehamburg.com, and you can support the project and this podcast through Patreon. All the links are in the description. Enjoy! Hey, thank you for tuning in for the M.A.R.E podcast. I just want to remind you that this is the second part, so the beginning may not make sense if you haven't checked out the first part, so maybe go into that and come back. If you have already, enjoy the episode.
There's a couple points, so I'd like to talk about a few things Brooke said. So as far as the public opinion thing goes, there was a part of this large, giant budget reconciliation bill, the big, beautiful bill, which is the dumbest name, because it's not even that, it's the Big Beautiful Bill Act, which doesn't make any sense at all, but whatever. That's a petty complaint, just bothers me personally as a writer. But part of one of the initial proposed provisions of that bill was a massive sell-off of federal lands, millions and millions of acres out here in the West where I'm from, on which is a bunch of cultural heritage.
I'll interject very quickly. The other thing they have a lot of is oil. That's why we want to sell them off.
Oil and timber, yeah, absolutely, for sure. And Mike Lee, who was a senator from Utah, he was the person who wanted to put that in the bill. There was a massive public backlash. I do think I need to be completely transparent here. I am not ideologically neutral on any of this. So I've been protesting against Trump since his first election. So you're not getting a non-biased view of any of this from me. But I was at a bunch of these protests about the land sale. And I rarely see such a broad subset of the American culture there. Like, people I would never expect to see protesting together were all at like this giant protest in Santa Fe. And they removed that provision from the bill. They're still trying to sell off a lot of that land. But it's not there. It was first struck out because it didn't follow Senate rules, whatever. But it was nice to see this like massive public backlash. And it was joined by like the governors and the senators of a bunch of these Western states who were against it. I mean, this is like grazing land too. Like, this is fundamental for ranchers, for hunters, for hikers and rock climbers and archaeologists and environmentalists. Like, it's necessary that this stuff stays under the control of the Bureau of Land Management and National Park Service. So it was good to see that. So that was my first point. The other thing I wanted to say about removing environmental protections. So the National Environmental Protection Act, which was created, I think, 1969 in response to a river getting lit on fire here, the Cuyahoga River. There was like a big oil spill. It, like, the whole river lit on fire. Everyone freaked out. And so they created the Environmental Protection Act. Had the Council for Environmental Quality, which released it did all the research, basically. At least is my understanding, because I'm not a member of it, obviously. Not that important yet. But they would do research about how to implement the National Environmental Protection Act, and then issued binding resolutions on federal agencies. Like, this is what you have to do. So the Council of Environmental Quality no longer exists. It exists, but it now cannot release binding resolutions on any federal agency, which means that each agency has to make its own determination about how to follow the act, which I can guarantee you is going to cause an absolute nightmare in environmental law for the next like 20 years while people try to figure out what that means. But it does remove the like advisory element to, or at least a unified advisory element from the federal government. And part of that is how to implement Section 106 of the National Historic Preservation Act, which is how we protect a lot of antiquities and cultural heritage in the United States. So that's just the mechanism through which the federal government has done what Brooke was talking about. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Well,
to
interesting.
add the
Yeah.
to add some, I don't know, whether it's like a, like the new dawn, or at least like balance this out a little bit. A lot of these
Steelman.
infrastructure projects, which I work on, the gold reef companies, they don't care about archaeology. They don't really care about the environment. Obviously not. They are oil and gas companies, so they care about making money.
Wait, you're
You know,
telling me Exxon doesn't care about the environment? I
I
thought
know,
BP
I
was
know.
like super pro environment. Oh my God.
Shocker.
That's why we did Deepwater Horizon spill. Okay.
Right, yeah. They did that
uh,
for the fish. They were trying to
yes,
protect the fish.
I wanted to get some birth defects. um, so these big projects, Exxon doesn't necessarily want to own these forever. If it becomes there's better options in the future, or may make more money if they sell it to another company to run. They're not sellable if they build them to like the lowest standards possible. International investors don't want to be involved with that, because when they try to do maintenance later on these large infrastructure projects, then they cannot get the permits. Because let's say you built I don't know, you put this oil rig right on the middle of a 16th century, like, you know, um, merchant vessel, or a 16th century pirate wreck, or maybe it's in the middle of like an indigenous settlement site right off the coast of Louisiana. They can't get the permits for that later if the laws ever change, which, fingers crossed, we all hope that these laws swing back towards protecting UCH materials. Um, yeah, so it's not a good business move for companies to like do this in the shittiest way possible. So my company has stayed, and we've still continued to have a lot of business. And I've been busy the entire summer working on these projects, because um, it's not out of a goodwill, but companies do want to avoid building big projects through NRHP eligible sites, which the NRHP is part of Section 106. It's the National Register of Historic Places. And both shipwrecks and like offshore resources and onshore resources are eligible for the NRHP. And in order to make that determination, it is like laid out in like a congressional act that has to be done by a qualified archaeologist. They can never change that.
Yeah. Wow. Well, first of all, just like taking a step back, but from something that Nico said about like this is a biased kind of like point of view, I tried to find someone who would be like pro all these changes, like a maritime archaeologist, obviously, or an archaeologist. I couldn't find anyone. So if anyone is listening and is pro these changes, they're more than welcome to come to the podcast and talk about it and see how like people have different opinions. But it doesn't sound like any archaeologist will have like a different opinion.
A debate bro podcast where I just argue.
Yeah. But yeah, and the other thing is that it reminds me of that thing someone else said about people will start caring about archaeology when, cultural heritage starts producing money and somehow becomes like the business that brings in money. And as long as it doesn't bring money, the people don't care. But as Brooke said, now people start to like kind of like they don't want to do it because that may cause trouble in the future. But wow, it's a complicated situation to be in. And I imagine that, of course, the United States, it's a big country, it's a big place. But I imagine every state is kind of like affected by it, like one way or the other. It doesn't make a difference where you are, right?
Some states less than others. A lot of states, like primarily Texas, have these really all-encompassing cultural heritage protection acts.
It's always Texas.
Starts, which I think Texas is like the origin story of Texas's like protection for, and I think it's called the Protection of Antiquities Act. It's the funniest in the world because there's this big Spanish Armada wreck. It was like a treasure fleet wrecked off the coast of Florida in our hurricane, and then this treasure hunter started like they're like, oh, gold. They find all the gold. They like take all the gold, and Texas is like, oh my god, guys, what if there's one in our water? And so they passed this really all-inclusive act. It's like you can't touch any of it. You have to like jump through a million hoops. And like they realized after the fact that most of it's meant to protect white people archaeology, white people history. They learned after the fact Texas, like you could pick up 5 rocks anywhere in Texas. Like 4 of them are guaranteed to be lithic artifacts. Like now companies have to shell out so much money to build anything in Texas, which it's protecting. One of them, this bill has ended up this act in Texas. It's been passed into law, so it's an act. This act in Texas, it protects the main group that a lot of this legislation now is aimed at erasing, which is indigenous groups, and to a very large extent also enslaved and African American archaeology.
Yeah, another big fight actually over speaking of indigenous groups. Biden created 2 national historic monuments, and it's Bears Ears, and there's another one I cannot remember the name. It's in Southern California, but they're massive. They contain a massive amount of archaeological evidence for their respective indigenous communities. Trump wants to revoke their protections. The Department of Justice has said that they intend to try and revoke their protections. As far as jurisprudence stands right now, that's illegal. They're not allowed to do that. It hasn't happened in the past. No president, or at least not as far as I'm aware, I could be wrong, but no president has revoked national monument status from a national monument in its entirety. Trump did shrink Bears Ears during his first administration, and then Biden expanded it. So yeah, there is
The only real way
some
he could
direct
take it
attack.
away, and he'd have to, if he did it legally, which he's not guaranteed to do, he'd have to prove that the site no longer has like quote unquote integrity, which is like the most broad and sweeping of the NRHP criteria, which it has to meet to be a national monument. Yeah, a site has to have integrity, and then every state.
What does that mean?
Yeah, what does it mean? No one.
So there isn't a unified. Every state can decide what that means. That's interesting.
Yeah, so the NRHP, the way that this is doled out and the way it's like enforced is in the United States. The act creates every state is required to have something called a State Historic Preservation Office, or SHPO, and then each SHPO employs a State Historic Preservation Officer, and they make the ultimate decision on whether a site meets the criteria set out in the NHPA, or the National Historic Preservation Act. Does it meet the criteria for a really important place, or a really important monument, or a really important archaeological site? There's, I think, 4 criteria, A, B, C, and D. Most archaeological sites fall under C, which is it important to local or regional history? And does it have research potential? It can be, the other one's like, it can be connected to an important person. It can be like an architectural style. I don't remember the 4th one. But beyond this, of course, all sites have to have integrity. They don't want sites which have been extensively looted, because then they're not really representative. They don't, if a site has been subject to a lot of erosion, then it may also not meet the criteria for integrity, because a lot of its defining features may be gone. Or let's say like a house, they like took away, they like replaced everything in the house. That site no longer has integrity. Or if like an archaeological site offshore, if they put an oil rig on top of it and it's destroyed now, that site no longer has integrity.
Wow. I mean, I think we're all thinking of the same thing. Yeah, thank you. Of how, like, let's I see a shipwreck. Let's put an oil rig through it, and then go and be like, doesn't have integrity, guys. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, I have a feeling that would maybe it would cause a lawsuit. Who knows? The problem is one of the big issues here is that now with all of this, because it's a massive broadside against multiple pillars of American society. Not that those pillars aren't rotten in some places. I'm not going to like go full throat to bat for the United States government. You'll never catch me doing that. But this is every organization, every advocacy group is stretched, I think, to the limit because they only have so much. A lot of these people rely on donations. They only have so much money to fight litigation. Lawyers in the U.S. can charge $1,000 an hour or more for their services, and so this is a serious problem because all the big battles that get fought, maybe you'll lose little ones because people they just don't have the time to defend potentially a shipwreck when the other opportunity cost is losing out on money to stop massive environmental pollution. So it's a serious issue on so many fronts. I've always hated reading the news, but reading the news in the past 6 months has just really destroyed any sense of
I so
non-nihilism, pessimism, or whatever that I've had in the past.
The other big way that they've made it really easy to destroy shipwrecks in particular is so I think the main agencies which regulate oil and gas development are, what is it, the BOEM, the Bureau of Ocean Energy
Yeah,
Management, and I think NOAA used to as well.
they've both been absolutely gutted.
They have been gutted. They have cut staff. They have cut resources. And obviously, yeah, you're well aware, George, offshore archaeology is incredibly expensive. And, it requires a lot of man hours to interpret a lot of this stuff. And so this was the easiest way for them to get rid of protections for archaeology. They made it so no one has enough time to dedicate to like protecting these things.
Well, and the NOAA thing really is. I'm sorry, George.
no, please go ahead, please. Yeah, I'm sure you have something much more meaningful to say than being like, "Wow."
Oh, I don't know about that. Because I'm just gonna be more upset again. But I mean, uh they cut almost $1 billion in funding from NOAA. I think it's like $794 million in funding. Trump initially wanted like 3.3 billion cuts to the agency, but a lot of those cuts were in the National Weather Service. They cut like 2,000 staff positions, and then those floods happened. The reason we had to reschedule this podcast was because we were working on flood recovery in New Mexico and Texas. Those floods killed 100 people in Texas. And like NOAA is the organization that's responsible for that kind of weather response. And the Texas issue was a little bit more complicated. Texas initially wanted, or the area wanted a better flood warning control system. I don't know the entire story there, but
They got rid of a lot of our weather balloons and a lot of our main weather satellites, which would have helped us predict this flood
oh yeah, the Department of
faster.
Defense is no longer sharing weather data, even though
Yeah.
that's been open access for like 70 years now. Um, yeah,
Wow.
Yeah, like I said, it's not just there's all the cultural issues. There's the ICE deportations, a lot of which are illegal, and even if regardless of the illegality, just insanely immoral, right? To just like ship someone off to South Sudan, even though they're from Jamaica, is insane. That's a crazy thing to do. Um, but besides that, the attack on science as an institution, as like any sort of uh truth to like fundamental truth to the way like the universe works is extremely disturbing to watch.
Yeah.
Sorry,
So is
I
it?
think I was
Yeah.
going somewhere with that and I just totally got lost in my
That's okay. So is this some clarification? Is this like targeted at every science, or is it like a humanities slash
no, it's
not
as far as I can tell, it's
using
everything.
manufacturing? It's everything.
Well,
Wow.
no, I
Yeah.
would say it is everything. They don't want to get rid of, let's say, a cure for cancer. They want to get rid of
Well,
policies which are contrary or have the potential to produce contrary results to their political their political objectives. And one of their political objectives is like they are invested in creating a hyper-nationalist identity, which will feed into fascism because that is he's ultimately a fascist authoritarian figure. And so they need to cut DEI. They need to cut which they've cut a lot of genetics research because I mean a lot of that is focused on DEI in the United States, and universities are hubs for DEI because of there's an older Supreme Court decision which decided that having uh, unique and differing viewpoints in educational spaces is integral to learning and the production of good science. So they want to cut DEI, they want to cut archaeology, they want to cut the humanities in general because there's a widespread belief in America that they don't matter, and that they're not important, which of course they are.
I mean, that's across the world, I think, this notion
Yeah,
that the humanities are like not
believe
important.
the humanities. But yeah, they are deeply invested in getting rid of any sort of legitimate research with the potential to oppose I don't even know what to call it. His Project 2025. That is ultimately what they're
Yeah.
trying to create. They're trying to eliminate any opposition to implementing Project 2025 in the United States, which I'll let Nikos explain what Project 2025 is quickly.
Well, so real quick, before I do that, I do want to say some of this is anecdotal because I didn't prepare specific numbers for this podcast for this, but they have slashed billions of dollars in funding to things like cancer research. They've attacked the National Institute of Health, where my sister worked for years. Um, they've so there is what did they eliminated the um
They
wait,
eliminated the Vaccine Advisory Council, but again,
yeah,
that
they eliminated the Vaccine Advisory Council,
that's about
exactly.
American Christian nationalism.
Yeah, so I mean, I do think that this is an attack on almost every field of science. And even my friends, I have friends who work in the defense industry, who are contractors in the defense industry, and tons of them have lost their jobs. I have friends who are contractors in nuclear safety. They've lost their jobs. This is like a broad, it's an attempt to cut down on government spending, um, of which the majority is the Pentagon, but they have to, so,
So I have a question. I have a question that I fear I might regret, but I'm going to do it anyway. If there's cuts of billions and billions of dollars, where does the money go?
well,
What's the point of cutting billions of to do what with that money?
To kill
well,
children
so
in Gaza. Just
yeah, there's that. There's definitely that. I think so. This is outside of my wheelhouse. I read economics blogs, but I am not an economist. So anything I say from here on out is even more speculation than what I was saying. But the new budget increased the amount of deficit that we'll take in by $5 trillion. Um, as far as I can tell, it's an attempt to reduce the federal government down to functionally nothing. A lot of conservatives in the United States are libertarian conservatives. They don't believe that the government should be involved in any sort of spending. Some people don't believe in it at all here.
they're called libertarians.
Yeah, well, it's like American libertarianism because that term is much broader. There's left wing. There are left wing libertarians, but conservative.
Libertarians are interested in getting
Yeah,
rid of the government and in removing the age of consent, which that second one is a pretty good
yeah,
idea.
that does come up a
There's
lot.
their values.
So I think the like Brooke said, a lot of this was outlined in something called Project 2025, which is one of an annual number of projects that the think tank, the Heritage Foundation, issues every year. I actually used to live right across the street from the Heritage Foundation when I worked in DC. Uh, I should have done something about it then. I'm kidding. But no, so they uh they release these projects every year, and a lot of it is about radical reformation of the United States into the way the federal government was, or at least the way a lot of people believe the federal government was, and a lot of back in the early or the latter half of the 19th century, which is before it had like serious power to enact nationwide policy. This is part of like decades of political action from these branches of American society, starting all the way back with like the John Birch Society, the Birchers, and even before that, they're like these radical conservative groups inside the United States that I don't believe in this like national state for a bunch of different reasons. Or if they do, they only want it for defense, and they believe that that's like its only constitutional job is for like the military and like protecting the borders of the country. And Project 2025, for whatever it's worth, that's a broad brush. A lot of people believe a lot of different things. Every person has their own political opinion. Obviously, I think it's to say, but the Heritage Foundation does a lot of this kind of activism, and they release a project every year. Project 2025 in particular was massively unpopular in the polls in the United States, and Trump disavowed it when he was running on election. I don't think anyone believed him because a lot of the people who work at the Heritage Foundation now work directly in his administration. And they've implemented a lot of the goals within that project. So yeah, that's broad strokes what Project 2025 is without getting into details. It's like it's a 900-page long document, which I read most of a long time ago, like back during the 2024 election cycle. So I don't want to speculate on the details though, because I don't think that being wrong about stuff in this conversation is a good thing.
Yeah. It sets a bad precedent. Definitely.
Exactly. So yeah, that's what that is. Yeah, and I do think it comes parceled with something that we talked about the last time I was on the podcast, actually, with this like erosion of any sort of trust in scientific institutions, but just the like process of science on its own in American life. But this is not just an American problem. This is a global problem brought on by social media. I mean, I was on the bus in Malta when I was getting my degree, and this guy in front of me just like started arguing with me about evolution, which kind of was quite
A wild topic to bring up with a stranger on a bus.
on the bus. Dear God. I didn't even start talking to him. He just started like giving me his opinions on evolution. So I do think, and this is not a new thing, right? But I do think that this is a serious problem that the U.S. has kind of been the first community to really fall prey to it in like such a targeted way. But it's not going to stop here, and it hasn't stopped here, right? Like I know it's happening in the UK. I know it's happening in Germany. And I think it's really dangerous. It will absolutely get people killed. And we're at a critical juncture with things like climate change. That if we're not operating from any sort of like scientific materialism, we're going to be in serious trouble forward. We're already in serious trouble, and it's only going to get worse. Again, I just was down in working on flood.
Yeah. No, it's what you're saying is absolutely true. We live in a world where we need to be more human, and we just like kill the humanities actively, because for all the reasons you said, people think, and it's not as you said, and I fully agree, and that's why we're doing this. It's not a USA thing. It's a worldwide phenomenon where people just say, no, it's not important to talk about the humanities. And I think when you're trying to like shut down the humanities, I think it shows how important it is and how it can help the people or everyone, just like, not just like know their history and their archaeology and where they're from, and like have a narrative about their lives and their land. It's about being more human, being exposed to other humans makes you more human.
Yeah, empathy.
So empathy, exactly. So wow, I don't know what to make of that. This is I think the one podcast that we're nearing the end, and I'm like, oh my god, this is dark. This is like I'm not excited about it. I don't know. You guys want to add anything to this conversation, or if we should wrap this up?
Oh,
Let the
I
people decide.
anyone who listens to this episode, if you are American, it's really important that you talk to your representatives. Yeah, be that your congressional, your House representatives, your senators. That is, it's one of our in the United States, one of the ways that we participate in democracy. It's very important and it's effective. So please contact your senators to talk about these issues if they matter to you. Complacency and just the belief that it's inevitable will not solve anything. It will just make it worse.
Right. For sure. Every single decision, every single thing that we are dealing with right now, in the world, not just in the United States, is the result of a policy decision made at some point. Like somebody came together and said, we're going to build our roads in this direction. And that is the reason why a town is oriented the direction it's oriented in, right? So because everything is a policy decision, we can make different policy decisions. These things aren't, forces of the universe. Although I do think there might be something to be said for the inevitable forces of history or whatever. But in the moment, you make different policy decisions, you create a different world. It might not be for yourself, but decades down the road, it will. And we were talking about the National Environmental Protection Act. That was created in the 70s. We're still talking about it today. It definitely had knock-on effects for the quality of American life. I'm pretty sure, I could be wrong, we got rid of leaded gasoline because of it, which, that's a good thing to get rid of. Rivers aren't being lit on fire anymore. That's good for the most part, although there's still major environmental disasters. But so yeah, no, Brooke's absolutely right. Yes, things are extremely bleak. And there are a couple other things I want to talk about before we're done that are bleak. But every single one of those things that are bleak is the direct result of a policy decision someone made at some.
And those policies are, again, they're guided by public opinion. You can go, you can participate in this issue with as small of a thing as going to your national parks. Those numbers, their number of visitors, that's really important for deciding how much money they need. Going to your museums, that's vitally important,
right?
Especially right now.
Protecting your community as best you can.
Yeah, absolutely. So what are the things you wanted to add? You said some things you want to talk about.
Oh yeah, I just wanted to briefly talk because we kind of got into the international thing. I did want to talk about the UNESCO stuff just as a final.
Oh yeah, go.
The UNESCO and some Gaza stuff because they're intertwined actually. So with Trump decided to pull out of UNESCO. Again, he pulled out in his last administration. The U.S. has a long spotty history with UNESCO. I think we owe them $400 million or $500 million in back membership dues because of the number of times we've left, which is insane because we were a founding member. But we left under Reagan the first time because, a lot like Ted Cruz, they were like, oh, they're supporting the Soviet Union, which sounds like something Ted Cruz would say today, that whole neo-Marxist thing. But then we rejoined under George W. Bush, and then in 2011, Obama stopped all funding to the UNESCO because of it allowed Palestine into the organization, or recognized Palestine as part of the organization. And that when Obama did that, that cut almost 1/5 of UNESCO's operating budget, which was, as my understanding is, that was devastating for the organization. Since then, UNESCO said that they've diversified, and now the U.S. is only 8% of UNESCO's operating budget. But, there's 26 UNESCO World Heritage Monuments in the United States. I don't know. I'm assuming that means we'll no longer get any sort of UNESCO funding for those. We won't leave until September of 2026. But still, if you're trying to support archaeology or cultural heritage or the humanities or sciences broadly, UNESCO is a great organization for that. And the U.S. pulling out, I think, is going to have effects. And that's kind of directly tied into the whole, Gaza and Israel issue. Israel also left UNESCO at the same time the U.S. did. And, since October, or between October of 2019 and January of 2020, I think, could be wrong on that date, but UNESCO identified 101 separate sites or heritage sites that have been damaged or destroyed um, by the ongoing war. Um, Al Jazeera said it's closer to 200 cultural heritage sites. And for us as like maritime archaeologists, they completely destroyed the ancient port of, I think it's Amphidon, by an airstrike. And further targeted demolition activities. But they've also the Israeli military has hit a bunch of other sites during that time. They destroyed 2 museums by bombing. And so like these things are, and almost every single site that was identified by UNESCO that was destroyed was protected by the 1954 Hague Convention. So both Israel and Palestine signed that agreement. They're supposed to be protected sites. A bunch of U.S. organizations have condemned that, but the U.S. is funding Israel in that effort, $17.9 billion or something, I think, over the past year or so, 2 years. So, like the actions of the United States, while they are mostly bad for people here right now, or at least the things we're talking about with cultural heritage preservation, they have knock-on effects all over the world. And it's really
Yeah.
disheartening. Sorry,
It's
Brooke ended it on such a like happy note, like, or at least an uplifting one. Like, you can do something, and then I'm like, well, let's completely destroy that. I apologize.
no, not. It's important. It's very important to talk about. I mean, they have not respected other conventions that have to do with human rights mostly, right? And I mean,
Right.
the last thing I'm expecting. I mean, this is a callback to our dear friend Judith, who said that in episode 2. Who said that when children are crying, I don't care about the harbor.
Yeah, no, and I think that that's a very
exactly
important
right.
thing.
And I want to like emphasize that we're not here to be like, oh yeah, people are dying. Yeah, okay, but the archaeological sites. But
No.
we also have a responsibility to kind of like share this, like put the spotlight on it and say, also, apart from all the terrible things that are happening, this also happened. Add that to the list of terrible things that are going on.
No, you're absolutely completely right. I don't want to give the impression that I care more.
Oh yeah, I know you won't.
But
that's why I feel like I need to emphasize that to the people listening that we're not here to be like, oh yeah, harbor was destroyed. Oh no, when all the like atrocities are happening down Gaza.
but those things, they are tied if
Mhm.
you're trying. I mean, I just read the headline, so I'm not sure about the details, but I do think that Israel said that it was going to maybe occupy Gaza. If you're trying to conduct that sort of occupation, then targeting cultural heritage is a thing that you do.
Yeah.
And it's prohibited in the Rome Statute. It is a direct component of genocide. So, yeah, it's extremely disturbing to watch, and I don't really like that all of the tax money of the United States citizens is now no longer funding things like Medicare and Medicaid, and instead going almost exclusively to the arms industry.
Stealing food out of children's mouths. Literally, they cut school lunch programs to fund it. Cutting SNAP benefits, which is food stamps, which food stamps have been shown to be one of the most effective ways to eliminate, food scarcity
Exactly.
in the
I
world.
mean, if you want to go back to
They're cutting that to fund fund starvation in Gaza, which is just
Yeah.
um,
if you want to go back to what Ted Cruz said about class warfare, cutting SNAP benefits is class warfare, but on behalf of the rich. Like, it's not like you're actively harming people's ability to feed themselves.
Yeah.
But Ted Cruz is not noted even in the United States for being a consistent or eloquent or skilled politician. I don't think anyone likes him, even his own party. So
All right. And on that note, let me thank you both for this meaningful conversation and a crash course into what's going on in the USA right now. This has been a brilliant podcast, and I hope people actually pay attention to it, and I don't know. I hope for the future. I don't know what to say. I don't know what there is to say anymore, especially for me, like being on the outside. But as we said plenty of times, these are effects. These are knock-off effects that we will are already feeling or will feel in the future. So I don't know. The people who listen to this podcast, I imagine, are archaeologists or people interested in archaeology or the humanities. So I don't know. Let's try and be the change we want to see in the world. That's too poetic. Anyway, but yeah,
No, absolutely. There's always some hope. I mean, something beautiful will happen. Just a matter of when.
but we need to bring that change, right? It's not just we
Yeah, no,
cannot just
it's not
expect it to
inevitable, but
happen. So yeah.
yeah, it has to be
Anyway,
us.
yeah. Thank you everyone for listening, for tuning in for another episode of the M.A.R.E podcast. And I hope to see you all again next time. Make sure to like contact M.A.R.E or me with like questions, suggestions, opinions about what has been said. If this is, I mean, if this sparks a debate, I mean, everyone's happy to do another one and just like discuss things or something more specific. So thank you everyone. See you next time.